My name is Jesse Feldman. I'm a cinematographer. So we're going to break down the bus stop scene from the end of episode 1 of season 3 of The Chi. So the other fun thing about shooting night exterior, can you hear me at all? The first thing to know about this scene is that bus stop doesn't exist. We placed it there, and this was something that again changed a few days before we shot it because we had another location that I had scouted a million times. I had a whole lighting plan, we had this and that, everything was planned. It was under a bridge a few blocks away, and part of the bridge started to collapse. So art department built this bus stop that Keisha's sitting under, and I worked with Brett Tanzer, the production designer, to make this and install that light overhead. And we had a couple different iterations on what it might look like and ended up looking like this. So one fun thing about shooting night exteriors nowadays is often streetlights have been changed out for newer LED, often colder, uglier lights. Ideally, I would have gelled all of the streetlights down the street, but it just wasn't practical to. So we just gelled the lights that were sort of right around where we were shooting. And again, on the schedule of TV, you don't have the luxury of showing up on set and just sitting there and planning it all out and saying, oh, let's do this or that, because you say one thing and that takes 20 minutes to happen. Tent City is what we called Ronnie's home, which you can see in the background in this scene. Those lights were existing fixtures that were in there, and that color was sort of the existing color that was in there. And there were so many of the lights, and I like the color anyway, that I decided to not gel them at all and just sort of go with that as a base. Funnily enough, when we shot later scenes in Tent City and later episodes, the city had started to change out those fixtures for updated LED fixtures, which were white and ugly and terrible. And we were scouting it when they were doing it one time, and I actually went up to the workers with the location manager and explained that we were shooting in here and asked if there was any way they could delay changing the fixtures. And the city was nice enough to do that for us, and they delayed changing the fixtures until after we shot there. In a later episode, we went back again after they had changed them, and we did have to go through and gel all of them. Had we known that would be the case, we might have just let them change them and gel them all then, because that might have been easier. You always have to weigh all these factors and think what's smarter, cheaper, better, and better might not be cheaper, better might be cheaper, it depends. I definitely wanted to take the approach for this season, a more realistic approach to the night exteriors. I didn't want them all to be just like heavily backlit and street wet downs and like sort of the more classic night exterior look. I wanted to augment what was there and just play around with those lights and add things. So like obviously the bus stop is added here with the light in the bus stop. There's also a light on the building just to the left of Keisha that was added onto that building and gelled to be a little greener. Color-wise, in this scene, I'm kind of going like orange and greenish. I tried to stick to a color palette of 2 or 3 colors, 1, 2, or 3 colors per frame, per scene, typically. We didn't want this to be an overly colorful season because of the content, and we just felt it was more appropriate and we could get more intentional with our colors. So we added the light on the building to the left of the bus stop. And again, that's something where I have to, either from being there myself or from pictures, place ahead of time because doing something like that requires locations to get permission from the building, and a lot of conversations have to be had before we can just put that light up there. And probably the rigging electrics have done it before we got there, so we can show up and do our minimal things and then start shooting. To the left of that, there's a little bit of orangish light that's sort of side backish lighting that fence in that area. which was just a sky panel on the ground, flagged off, just to kind of illuminate that area so it didn't fall totally dark there. There's a light on the house just by the stop sign, or that apartment, that we liked just for a little bit of texture. And I wanted to do something a little bit different with there, but we ended up not having access to that apartment on the day, so I didn't get to. Keisha herself was just lit from the ground with some lights augmenting the overhead light. There's a shot of Ronnie with the actual moon in the background, which just kind of worked out to be there when we shot it and looked cool, so we went with it. You can see there's some other lights, sort of downlighting some graffiti on the wall by Tent City that we placed, like the light by the bus stop, that we just sort of put a handful of lights down the strip. I sort of just on an overhead just circled areas, and then the team would go out and put it up. The bus was lit with its own lights that we just ND'd down. I probably would have taken them down a little bit more had we had the time to, because sometimes you make a guess on something. I think it was in 6 or in 9 that we put on them. And it takes so long to do again. So I made the guess of in 6 or in 9, and then they did it, and then you're ready to shoot, and it shows up. And if it's too bright, sometimes you don't have the luxury of changing it because it'll take another 20 or 30 minutes to redo it. So you just do it as is. I remember in color we did a power window on the bus's lights specifically and tracked it and brought them down a little bit more because they were a little bit too bright. With night work, sometimes you have to have a little bit more prep involved because you have to know which directions you're shooting lighting-wise, so you can plan for that. Generally, we started wider and went tighter with this scene. We shot in the bus very last, which is one of the reasons why it's handheld in there, because we had no time and we're just running out. That was probably the last stuff we shot. The shot of the phone was a shot we picked up months later on stage. So in terms of deciding how to break down the bus stop scenes, and how to shoot that on the day and when to shoot each shot and everything, it was a collaboration between Jet Wilkinson, the director, and I. And luckily, because this was the first episode, again, we had the chance to prep it properly. So we had a pretty good idea going into that night what we were going to do.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. We'd love it if you'd subscribe to our channel so that we can keep bringing you more creative people and their experiences. Thanks again for watching.